Hello everyone, today we're going to be reading 2 Samuel, chapter 9 to 16. Let's get right into it. This is going to be a good bit. It has my boy Absalom in it, although he's not a good guy. I really like this part where Absalom's in it still. It's one of my favorite parts of 2 Samuel, but we're going to get into it. David asks, "Is there anyone still left at the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel at Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth, at your service," he replied. "Do not be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore you to all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in their crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. In the course of time, that's the chair, by the way. In the course of time, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him as king. David thought, "I will show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me." So David sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. When David's men came to the land of the Ammonite commander said to Hanun the Lord, "Do you think David is honoring your father by sending envoys to you to express sympathy? Hasn't David sent them to you only to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it?" So Hanun seized David's envoys, shaved off half of each man's beard, cut off their garments at the buttocks, and sent them away. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, "Stay at Jericho till your beards have grown, and then come back." When the Ammonites realized that they had become obnoxious to David, they hired 20,000 Aramean foot soldiers from Beth-Rehob and Zobah, as well as the king of Maacah with 1,000 men, and also 12,000 men from Tob. On hearing this, David sent Joab out with the entire army of fighting men. The Ammonites came out and drew up in battle formation at the entrance of the city gate. While the Arameans of Zobah and Rehob and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the open country. Joab saw that there were battle lines in front of him and behind him, so he selected some of the best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Arameans. He put the rest of the men under the command of Abishai, his brother, and deployed them against the Ammonites. Joab said, "If the Arameans are too strong for me, then you are to come to my rescue. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come to rescue you. Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people in the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight." Then Joab and the troops with him advanced to fight the Arameans, and they fled before him. When the Ammonites realized that the Arameans were fleeing, they fled before Abishai and went inside the city. So Joab returned from fighting the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. After the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel, they regrouped. Hadadezer and Arameans brought from beyond the Euphrates River. They went to Halim, with Shobach, the commander of Hadadezer's army, leading them. When David was told of this, he gathered all Israel, crossed the Jordan, and went to Halam. The Arameans formed their battle lines to meet David and fought against him, but they fled before Israel. And David killed 700 of their charioteers and 40,000 of their foot soldiers. He also struck down Shobach, the commander of their army, and he died there. When all the kings who were vassals of Hadadezer saw that they had been routed by Israel, they made peace with the Israelites and became subject to them. So the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, I am pregnant. So David sent this word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite, and Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants, and did not go down to his house. David was told, Uriah did not go home. So he asked Uriah, haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Then David said to him, stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants, and did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it he wrote, put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die. So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, son of the men in David's army, fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Joab sent David a full account of the battle. He instructed the messenger, when you have finished giving the king the account of the battle, the king's anger may flare up, and he may ask you, why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know they would shoot arrows from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal? Didn't a woman drop an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died in Thebez? Why did you get so close to the wall? If he asks you this, then say to him, moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. The messenger set out, and when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, the men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. David told the messenger, say this to Joab, don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. The Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, there were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had brought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and had no pity. Then Nathan said to David, you are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah, and if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword, and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore, the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me, and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives, and give them to one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, Well, I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel. Then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. But because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die. After Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had borne to David, and he became ill. David pleaded with God for the child. He fasted and spent the nights lying in sackcloth on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he refused, and he would not eat any food with them to get him up from. And he would not eat any food with them. On the seventh day, the child died. David's attendants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought, while the child was still living, he wouldn't listen to us when we spoke to him. How can we tell him that the child is dead? He may do something desperate. David noticed that his attendants were whispering among themselves, and he realized the child was dead. Is the child dead? He asked. Yes, they replied. He is dead. Then David got up from the ground. After he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes, he went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request they served him food, and he ate. His attendants asked him, Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept, but now that the child is dead, you get up and eat. He answered, While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, Who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved him, and because the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet to name him Jedediah. Meanwhile, Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and captured the royal citadel. Joab then sent messengers to David, saying, I have fought against Rabbah and taken its water supply. Now muster the rest of the troops and besiege the city and capture it. Otherwise I will take the city, and it will be named after me. So David mustered the entire army and went to Rabbah and attacked and captured it. David took the crown from the king's head, and it was placed on his own head. It weighed a talent of gold, and it was set with precious stones. David took a great quantity of plunder from the city and brought out the people who were there, consigning them to labor with saws and with iron picks and axes, and he made them work at brick-making. David did this to all the Ammonite towns. Then he and his entire army returned to Jerusalem. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. She was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to do anything to her. Now Amnon had an advisor named Jonadab, son of Shemiah, David's brother. Jonadab was a very shrewd man. He asked Amnon, Why do you, the king's son, look so haggard morning after morning? Won't you tell me? Amnon said to him, I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Go to bed and pretend to be ill, Jonadab said. When your father comes to see you, say to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight so I may watch her and then eat it from her hand. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. When the king came to see him, Amnon said to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and make some special bread in my sight so I may eat from her hand. David sent word to Tamar at the palace, Go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him. So Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was lying down. She took some dough, kneaded it, made the bread in his sight, and baked it. Then she took the pan and served him the bread, but he refused to eat. Send everyone out of here, Amnon said, so everyone left him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, Bring the food here into my bedroom, so I may eat from your hand. And Tamar took the bread she had prepared and brought it to her brother Amnon in his bedroom. But when she took it to him to eat, he grabbed her and said, Come to bed with me, my sister. No, my brother, she said to him, Don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. What about me? Where could I get rid of my disgrace? And what about you? You would be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you. But he refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than her, he raped her. Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, Get up and get out. No, she said to him, Sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done to me. But he refused to listen to her. He called his personal servant and said, Get this woman out of my sight and bolt the door after her. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. She was wearing an ornate robe, for this was the kind of garment the virgin daughters of the king wore. Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the ornate robe she was wearing. She put her hands on her head and went away, weeping aloud as she went. Her brother Absalom said to her, Has that Amnon your brother been with you? Be quiet for now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart. And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman. When King David heard all this, he was furious. And Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep shearers were at Baal Hazor, near the border of Ephraim, he invited all the king's sons to come there. Absalom went to the king and said, Your servant has had shearers come. Would the king and his attendants please join me? No, my son, the king replied. All of us should not go. We would only be a burden to you. Although Absalom urged him, he still refused to go, but gave him his blessing. Then Absalom said, If not, please let my brother Amnon come with us. The king asked him, Why should he go with you? But Absalom urged him, so he sent with him Amnon and the rest of the king's sons. Absalom ordered his men, Listen, when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine, and I say to you, Strike Amnon down, then kill him. Don't be afraid. Haven't I given you this order? Be strong and brave. So Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered. Then all the king's sons got up, mounted their mules, and fled. While they were on their way, the report came to David. Absalom has struck down all the king's sons. Not one of them is left. The king stood up, tore his clothes, and lay down on the ground, and all his attendants stood by, bearing their clothes torn. But Jonathan, son of Shimea, David's brother, said, My lord should not think that they killed all the princes. Only Amnon is dead. This has been Absalom's express intention ever since the day Amnon raped his sister Tamar. My lord the king should not be concerned about the report that all the king's sons are dead. Only Amnon is dead. Meanwhile, Absalom had fled. Now the man standing watch looked up and saw many people on the road west of him, coming down the side of the hill. The watchman went and told the king, I see men in the direction of Horonaim, on the side of the hill. Jonadab said to the king, See, the king's sons have come. It has happened just as your servant said. As he finished speaking, the king's sons came in, wailing loudly. The king too and all his attendants wept very bitterly. Absalom fled and went to Talmai, son of Ammihud, the king of Geshur. But King David mourned many days for his son. After Absalom fled and went to Geshur, he stayed there 3 years, and King David longed to go to Absalom, for he was consoled concerning Amnon's death. Joab, son of Zeruiah, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom, so Joab sent someone to Tekoa and had a wise woman brought from there. He said to her, Pretend you are in mourning, dress in mourning clothes, and don't use any cosmetic lotions. Act like a woman who has spent many days grieving for the dead. Then go to the king and speak these words to him. And Joab put the words in her mouth. When the woman from Tekoa went to the king, she fell with her face to the ground to pay him honor, and she said, Help me, your majesty. The king asked her, What is troubling you? She said, I am a widow. My husband is dead. I, your servant, had 2 sons. They got into a fight with each other in the field, and no one was there to separate them. One struck the other and killed him. Now the whole clan has risen up against your servant. They say, Hand over the one who struck his brother down, so that we may put him to death. For the life of his brother whom he killed, then we will get rid of the heir as well. They will put out the only burning coal I have left, leaving my husband neither name nor descendant on the face of the earth. The king said to the woman, Go home, and I will issue an order in your behalf. But the woman from Tekoa said to him, Let my lord the king pardon me and my family, and let the king and his throne be without guilt. The king replied, If anyone says anything to you, bring them to me, and they will not bother you again. She said, Then let the king invoke the Lord his God to prevent the avenger of blood from adding to the destruction, so that my son will not be destroyed. As surely as the Lord lives, he said, not one hair of your son's head will fall to the ground. Then the woman said, Let your servant speak a word to my lord the king. Speak, he replied. The woman said, Why then have you devised a thing like this against the people of God? When the king says this, does he not convict himself? For the king has not brought back his banished son. Like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be recovered, so we must die. But that is not what God desires. Rather, he devises ways so that a banished person does not remain banished from him. And now I have come to say this to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. Your servant thought, I will speak to the king. Perhaps he will grant his servant's request. Perhaps the king will agree to deliver his servant from the hand of the man who is trying to cut off both me and my son from God's inheritance. And now your servant says, May the word of my lord the king secure my inheritance, for my lord the king is like an angel of God and discerning good and evil. May the Lord your God be with you. Then the king said to the woman, Don't keep from me the answer to what I am going to ask you. Let my lord the king speak, the woman said. The king asked, Isn't the hand of Joab with you in all of this? The woman answered, As surely as you live, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right or to the left from anything my lord the king says. Yes, it was your servant Joab who instructed me to do this, and who put all these words into my mouth of your servant. Your servant Joab did this to change the present situation. My lord has wisdom, like that of an angel of God. He knows everything that happens in the land. The king said to Joab, Very well, I will do it. Go, bring back the young man Absalom. Joab fell with his face to the ground to pay him honor, and he blessed the king. Joab said, Today your servant knows that he has found favor in your eyes, my lord the king, because the king has granted his servant's request. Then Joab went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king said, He must go to his own house. He must not see my face. So Absalom went to his own house and did not see the face of the king. In all Israel there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the top of his head to the sole of his feet there was no blemish in him. Whenever he cut the hair of his head, he used to cut his hair once a year, because it became too heavy for him. He would weigh it, and its weight was 200 shekels by the royal standard. 3 sons and a daughter were born to Absalom. His daughter's name was Tamar, and she became a beautiful woman. Absalom lived 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing the king's face. Then Absalom sent for Joab in order to send him to the king, but Joab refused to come to him. So he sent a second time, but he refused to come. Then he said to his servants, Look, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire. So Absalom's servant set the field on fire. Then Joab did go to Absalom's house, and he said to him, Why have your servants set my field on fire? Absalom said to Joab, Look, I sent word to you, and you said, Come here, so I can send you to the king to ask, Why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me if I was still there. Now then, I want to see the king's face, and if I am guilty of anything, let him put me to death. So Joab went to the king and told him this. Then the king summoned Absalom, and he came in and bowed down with his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses, and with 50 men to run ahead of him. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, What town are you from? He would answer, Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel. Then Absalom would say to him, Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you. And Absalom would add, If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice. Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. At the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. While your servant was living at Geshur in Aram, I made this vow. If the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron. The king said to him, Go in peace. So he went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel to say, As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, Absalom is king in Hebron. 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went quite innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel, the Gileonite, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown, and so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. A messenger came and told David, The hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom. Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword. The king's officials answered him, Your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses. The king set out, with his entire household following him, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at the edge of the city. All his men marched past him, along with all the Kerethites and Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath and marched before the king. The king said to Ittai, the Gittite, Why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You are a foreigner, an exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday, and today shall I make you wander about with us, when I do not know where I am going? Go back and take your people with you. May the Lord show you kindness and faithfulness. But Ittai replied to the king, As surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there will your servant be. David said to Ittai, Go ahead, march on. So Ittai the Gittite marched on with all his men and the families that were with him. The whole countryside wept aloud as all the people passed by. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people marched on toward the wilderness. Zadok was there too, and all the Levites who were with him were carrying the ark of the covenant of God. They set down the ark of God, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until all the people had finished leaving the city. Then the king said to Zadok, Take the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the Lord's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it and his dwelling place again. But if he says, I am not pleased with you, then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him. The king also said to Zadok the priest, Do you understand? Go back to the city with my blessing. Take your son Ahimaaz with you, and also Abiathar's son Jonathan. You and Abiathar return with your 2 sons. I will wait at the fords in the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of God back to Jerusalem and stayed there. But David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered, and he was barefoot. All the people were with him covered their heads too, and were weeping as they went up. Now David had been told, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. So David prayed, Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into foolishness. When David arrived at the summit where people used to worship God, Hushai the Archite was there to meet him, his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, If you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, Your Majesty, I will be your servant. I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant, and you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. Won't the priests Zadok and Abiathar be there with you? Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Their 2 sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, there with him. Send them to me with anything you hear. So Hushai, David's confidant, arrived at Jerusalem as Absalom was entering the city. When David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, there was Ziba, the steward of Mephibosheth, waiting to meet him. He had a string of donkeys saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, 100 cakes of figs, and a skin of wine. The king said to Ziba, Why have you brought these? Ziba answered, The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and fruit are for the men to eat, and the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the wilderness. The king then asked, Where is your master's grandson? Ziba said to him, He is staying in Jerusalem because he thinks today the Israelites will restore to me my grandfather's kingdom. Then the king said to Ziba, All that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours. I humbly bow, Ziba said. May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king. As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cussed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. As he cussed, Shimei said, Get out, you murderer, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has given you the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head. But the king said, What does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord said to him, Curse David, who can ask, Why do you do this? David then said to Abishai and all his officials, My son, my own flesh and blood, is trying to kill me. How much more than this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today. So David and his men continued along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. The king and all the people with him arrived at the destruction exhausted, and there he refreshed himself. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the men of Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. Then Hushai the Archite, David's confidant, went to Absalom and said to him, Long live the king, long live the king. Absalom said to Hushai, So this is the love you show your friend. If he's your friend, why didn't you go with him? Hushai said to Absalom, "No, the one chosen by the Lord, by these people, and by all the men of Israel, his I will be, and I will remain with him. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve the son? Just as I served your father, so I will serve you." Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give us your advice. What should we do?" Ahithophel answered, "Sleep with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself obnoxious to your father, and the hands of everyone with you will be more resolute." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now in those days, the advice Ahithophel gave was like that of one who inquires of God. That was how both David and Absalom regarded all of Ahithophel's advice. There you go. It's getting real dramatic now. You're seeing some rebellion from Absalom, David's son, who, isn't really acting like a son of David. So, most kings in David's day tried to wipe out the families of their rivals in order to prevent descendants from seeking the throne. But, as we see in chapter 9, David showed kindness to Mephibosheth, whose father was Jonathan and whose grandfather was King Saul. David was kind partly because of his loyalty to God's previously anointed king, partly for political reasons, to unite Judah and Israel, and mainly because of his promise to show kindness to all of Jonathan's descendants. Verse 3 of chapter 9 says, "The king asked, 'Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?'" The story of how Mephibosheth became lame is recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 4, verse 4. Mephibosheth was 5 years old when Saul and Jonathan died. Verse 5 to 6 says, "So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to him to pay him honor." Mephibosheth was afraid to visit the king, who wanted to treat him like a prince. Although Mephibosheth feared for his life and may have felt unworthy, David wanted to honor him and show him the love and loyalty he had promised Jonathan. When God graciously offers us forgiveness of sins and eternal life, we may feel unworthy, but God shows us his grace out of love for us, a reception even warmer than the one David gave Mephibosheth waits for all who receive God's gift through trusting Jesus Christ, not because we deserve it, but because of what God has promised. And verse 7 says, "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." So, David's treatment of Mephibosheth shows his integrity as a leader, who accepted his obligation to show love and mercy. His generous provision for Jonathan and for Jonathan's son goes beyond any political benefit he might have received. Do you keep your promises to others as David did? Are you able to forgive those who may have wronged you? Can you be generous with those who you think don't deserve it? Each time we show compassion and keep our word, our character is strengthened and we become more like Jesus. Verse 4 to 5 of chapter 10 says, "So Hanan seized David's envoys, shaved off half of each man's beard, cut off their garments at the buttocks, and sent them away. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, 'Stay at Jericho till your beards have grown, and then come back.'" In Israelite culture, all men wore full beards. It was a sign of maturity and authority. Thus, when these ambassadors had their beards half shaved, they suffered great indignity and shame. Having their garments cut off was also meant to humiliate and embarrass them. And embarrass them it did. Verse 6 says, "When the Ammonites realized that they had become obnoxious to David, they hired 20,000 Aramean foot soldiers from Beth-rehob and Zobah, as well as the king of Makkah, with 1,000 men, and also 12,000 men from Tab." Hanan took the wrong advice because he didn't believe the true motives of the ambassadors. Rather than accepting their sympathy, he humiliated them. Then he made matters worse by marshaling his forces for war in reaction to David's anger over this international incident. Hanan should have thought through the advice from his commanders more carefully, but even if he had not, he should have tried to negotiate with David. Instead, he refused to admit any fault and prepared for war. often we respond angrily and defensively rather than admitting our mistakes, apologizing, and trying to diffuse the other person's anger. Instead of taking a stand and fighting, we should seek peace. Verse 12 says, "Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people in the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight." Our faith in God and our actions should work together. Joab said, "Let us fight bravely." In other words, the people needed to do what they could, using their minds to figure out the best techniques and using their available resources. But Joab also said, "The Lord will do what is good in his sight." He knew that the outcome was ultimately in God's hands. We should use our minds and our resources to obey God while at the same time trusting him for the outcome. Chapter 11 to chapter 12 in the episode with about David and Bathsheba. In the episode with Bathsheba, David allowed himself to fall deeper and deeper into sin in several ways. He abandoned his purpose by staying home from war. He focused on his own desires. When temptation came, he leaned into it instead of turning away from it. He sinned deliberately. He tried to cover up his sin by deceiving others. He committed murder to continue the cover-up, though eventually his sin was exposed and punished. The consequences of his sin were far-reaching, affecting many people, especially his immediate family. David could have chosen to stop and turn from this spiral of sin at any stage along the way, but once the cycle of sin and cover-up gets moving, it is difficult to stop. The deeper the mess, the less we want to admit having caused it. It's much easier to stop sliding down a hill when you are near the top than when you are halfway down. By then, you are moving at such a fast pace that you're at the bottom before you know it. The best solution is to avoid sin before it even starts. Verse 1 says, of chapter 11, by the way, says, "In the spring, at the time when kings go after war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem." Winter is the rainy season in Israel, the time when crops are planted. Spring was a good time to go to war because the roads were dry, making travel easier for the movements of troops, supply wagons, and chariots. In Israel, wheat and barley were ready to be harvested in the spring. These crops were an important food source for traveling armies. This successful siege put an end to the Ammonites' power. From this time on, the Ammonites were subject to Israel. Verse 3 to 4 says, "And David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, 'She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite.' Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness. Then she went back home." As David looked from the roof of the palace, he saw a beautiful woman bathing. Kind of ironic that her name's Bathsheba, and thus David found her in a bath. Ironic, right? And whenever David saw her, he was filled with lust. David should have left the roof and fled the temptation, or perhaps sensitively sent word through a trusted messenger to make the woman aware that she was visible. Instead, he entertained the temptation by keeping his eyes on her and then inquiring about her. The results were devastating. Take these actions in order to flee from temptation. Ask God in earnest prayer to help you stay away from people, places, and situations that may tempt you. Memorize and meditate on portions of Scripture that combat your specific weaknesses. At the root of most temptation is a real need or desire that God knows you have and can be filled in a proper way, but you must trust in His time. Trust in His timing. Find a method. My goodness, Satan does not like me saying the truth, does he? Find another believer with whom you can openly share your struggles and call this person for help when temptation strikes. The progression of the story makes it plain that David was clearly wrong. David used his position of power and authority as king to exploit Bathsheba and ultimately to manipulate Joab and take advantage of Uriah. David treated her as an object to fulfill his lust. In the Hebrew text, Bathsheba's name isn't mentioned until verse 5 of chapter 11, by the way. David himself does not address her nor refer to her by name. Until this point in his reign, David had been submissive to both the law and God, but here he disobeyed both. With this act, David began to behave like the kings of all the other nations, by taking from his people whatever he wanted without thinking through the consequences. Leaders in our churches and institutions often find themselves caught in the same grasp of power that David did, which frequently leads to sin. Godly leaders should behave in a manner that protects and respects those in their care and under their leadership. When we witness or experience exploitation or manipulation by our leaders, we need to be willing to step forward and avoid what is happening, regardless of the consequences, much like the prophet Nathan does. The phrase, "she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness," means that Bathsheba had just completed the ritual bathing that Israelite women had to carry out following menstruation. Thus, she could not have already been pregnant by her own husband when David slept with her. Leviticus chapter 15, verses 19 to 30 gives more information on these rites that Bathsheba had to perform. Verse 15 says, "In it," he wrote, "put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest, then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." David put both Bathsheba and Joab in difficult situations. Bathsheba knew it was wrong to commit adultery, but to refuse a king's request could mean punishment or death. Joab did not know why Uriah had to die, but it was obvious the king wanted him killed. We sometimes face situations with only two apparent choices, and both seem wrong. Bathsheba had to decide between committing adultery and disobeying the king. Joab's obvious choices were to disobey the king or deliberately put one of his soldiers in harm's way. When such a dilemma arises, we must not lose sight of what God wants. The answer may be to pray and seek out more choices. By doing this, we are likely to find a choice that honors God. Verse 17 says, "When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Uriah and several other soldiers died as a result of David's scheme." Sin often hurts innocent bystanders. When you are tempted to do something that is wrong, remember the people who could be hurt by your sin and resist the temptation. Verse 25 says, David told the messenger, "Say this to Joab, don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as another as well. No, the sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it." Say this to encourage Joab. David's response to Uriah's death seems flippant and insensitive. While he had grieved deeply for Saul and Abner, his biggest rivals, he showed no grief for Uriah, a good man with strong spiritual character. And why did he not show no grief? David had become callous to his own sin, hardening his heart against guilt and shame. The only way he could cover up his sin, which was adultery, was to sin again, murder. And soon he no longer felt guilty for what he had done. Feelings are not reliable guides for determining right and wrong. Deliberate, repeated sinning had dulled David's sensitivity to God's laws and the rights of others. The more you try to cover up a sin, the more insensitive you become toward it. Don't become hardened to sin as David did. Confess your wrong actions to God before you forget they are sins, and better yet, stay away from what is tempting you. As a prophet, Nathan was required to confront sin, even the sin of a king. In chapter 12, we see that he did confront sin. He rebuked David for his sin. He needed great courage, skill, and tact to speak to David in a way that would make him aware of his wrong actions. When you have to confront someone with unpleasant news, pray for courage, skill, and tact. If you want that person to respond constructively, think through what you are going to say. How you present your message may be as important as what you say. Season your words with wisdom. Verse 5 to 6 says, David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity." Almost a year had passed since David sinned regarding Bathsheba and Uriah, and David had become so insensitive to his own sins that he didn't realize he was the villain in Nathan's story. The qualities we condemn in others are often our own character flaws, which friends, associates, or family members do you find easy to criticize and hard to accept. Instead of trying to change them, ask God to help you understand the feelings and see your own flaws more clearly. You may discover that in condemning others, you have been condemning yourself. Verse 10 to 14 says, "Now therefore the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says, out of your own household I'm going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel." Then David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." Nathan replied, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. But because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die." The predictions in these verses came true because David murdered Uriah and stole his wife. Murder was a constant threat in David's family. His household household rebelled against him, his wives were given to another in public view, and his first child by Bathsheba died. Are you currently being tempted by a moment of pleasure that you know would be a sin if you followed through with it? Pause to consider the potential devastating consequences. If David had known the painful consequences of his sin, he might not have pursued the pleasure of the moment. During this incident, David wrote Psalm 51, giving valuable insight into his character and offering hope for us as well. No matter how miserable guilt makes you feel or how terribly you have sinned, you can pour out your heart to God and seek his forgiveness as David did. You may still have to experience the consequences of your actions, but God's forgiveness is always available if we confess our sin to him and are truly sorry for what we've done. If we repent, God will restore us to a place of love and usefulness. David also wrote Psalm 32 to express the joy he felt after he was forgiven. David had confessed and repented of his sin, but God's judgment was that his child would die. The consequences of David's sin were irreversible. Sometimes an apology isn't enough. When God forgives us and restores our relationship with him, he doesn't eliminate all the consequences of our wrongdoing. We may be tempted to say, if this is wrong, I can always confess and apologize to God. But we must remember that we may set into motion events with irreversible consequences. Why did this child have to die? This was not a judgment on the child for being conceived out of wedlock, but a judgment on David for his sin. According to the law of Moses, David and Bathsheba deserved to die. God spared their lives and took the child instead. God still had work for David to do in building the kingdom. The child's death was a horrible punishment for David and Bathsheba to bear. Also, had the child lived, God's name probably would have been dishonored among Israel's pagan neighbors. What would they have thought of a God who rewards murder and adultery by giving a king a new heir? A baby's death is tragic, but despising God brings death to entire nations. While God readily forgave David's sins, he did not negate all its consequences. Verse 15 says, after Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had borne to David, and he became ill. Nathan, a prophet of great wisdom, bravery, obedience, and loyalty, gives three crucial messages at three critical times in David's life. He told David that his son would build the temple and that David's dynasty would last forever. He confronted David with the sin of adultery. He helped David place Solomon on the throne. We see that David mourned for his child, and his advisors tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. And once his child died, his advisors were too scared to tell him. And so they whispered, and David saw the whispering, and he asked, is my child dead? And they said yes. And then David got on some good clothes, washed, and began worshiping the Lord and sacrificing. David did not continue to dwell on his sin. He returned to God, and God forgave him, opening the way to begin his life anew. Even the name God gave Solomon, Jedediah, meaning loved by the Lord, was a reminder of God's grace. When we return to God, experience his forgiveness and change our ways, and he gives us a fresh start. To feel forgiven as David did, admit your sins to God and turn to him, then move ahead with a new approach to life. Perhaps the most bitter thing parents can experience in life is the death of their child. For comfort in such difficult circumstances, parts of the Bible that are good to read is Psalms 16, 17, 139, and Isaiah 40. Go read those if you're having to go through stuff such as painful or something like that. If you're having to go through something that painful. Psalm 16, 17, 139, and Isaiah 40. Verse 24 says, Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved him. Solomon was the fourth son of David and Bathsheba. Therefore, it is clear that several years had passed between the death of their first child and Solomon's birth. Bathsheba may so have been grieving over their first child's death. We see in chapter 13, David now faced sins in his own family that were consequences of those he had committed. The sin in his life was magnified in the lives of his children. If you are a parent, you can't always control what your children do, but you can love and obey God and show them how to live their lives in obedience to God's will. Verse 3 to 5 says, if I can find it, Now Amnon had an advisor named Jonadab, son of Shemiah, David's brother. Jonadab was a very shrewd man. He asked Amnon, Why do you, the king's son, look so haggard morning after morning? Won't you tell me? Amnon said to him, I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Go to bed and pretend to be ill, Jonadab said. When your father comes to see you, say to him, I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight, so I may watch her and then eat it from her hand. Amnon was encouraged by his cousin Jonadab to commit sexual sin. We may be more vulnerable to the advice of our relatives and friends because we are close to them. However, make sure to evaluate every piece of advice by God's standards, even when it comes from those you are closest to. Verse 14 to 15 says, "But he refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than she, he raped her. Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, 'Get up and get out.' Love and lust are very different. After Amnon raped his sister, his love turned to hate. Although he had claimed to be in love, he was actually overcome by lust. Love is patient. Lust requires immediate satisfaction. Love is kind. Lust is harsh. Love does not demand its own way. Lust does." You can read about the characteristics of real love in 1 Corinthians 13 if you want to go read that. Lust may feel like love at first, but when physically expressed, it results in self-disgust and hatred of the other person. If you just can't wait, what you feel is not true love. Verse 16 says, "No," she said to him, "sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done to me." Rape was strictly forbidden by God. Why would Tamar say that sending her away was even worse? By throwing her out, Amnon made it look as if Tamar had made a shameful proposition to him, and there were no witnesses on her behalf because he had dismissed the servants. His crime destroyed her chances of marriage. Since she was no longer a virgin, in that culture she could not be given in marriage. Verse 20 says, "Her brother Absalom said to her, 'Has that Amnon your brother been with you? Be quiet for now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart.' And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman." Absalom tried to comfort Tamar and persuade her to not turn the incident into a public scandal. Secretly, he planned to take revenge against Amnon himself. This he would do 2 years later. Absalom told Tamar the crime was only a family matter, but God's standards for moral conduct are not suspended when we deal with family matters. Verse 21 to 24 says, "When David heard all this, he was furious, and Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep shearers were at Baal-hazor, near the border of Ephraim, he invited all the king's sons to come there. Absalom went to the king and said, 'Your servants had shearers come. Will the king and his attendants please join me?' David was angry with Amnon for raping Tamar, but David did not punish him. David probably hesitated because he didn't want to cross Amnon, who was his firstborn son, and therefore next in line to be king, and David was guilty of a similar sin himself in his adultery with Bathsheba. While David was unsurpassed as a king and military leader, he lacked skill, sensitivity, and integrity as a husband and father. Hatred often leads to disaster. Absalom had a reason to be angry with Amnon, but instead of confronting Amnon with his sin, Absalom allowed his anger to fester into hatred. This produced revenge instead of resolution. When you become angry at a wrong done to you or someone else, avoid the mistake of getting even. Instead, try to confront the person and address the issue. And we see Absalom tried to flee to Geshur because King Talmai was his grandfather and he would be welcome. And this was after he killed Amnon. He fled to Geshur. I don't know why I said tried, but he fled to Geshur after he killed Amnon because of his grandfather Talmai. And so, King Talmai, actually. Verse 14, verse 1 says, "Joab, son of Zeruiah, knew that the king's heart longed for Absalom." Why is so much attention given to Absalom in this? His revenge against Amnon and rebelling against David were beginning the final decline of David's kingdom that had been prophesied by Nathan earlier. The cycle of lust and murder had begun with David's adultery with Bathsheba. By killing his half-brother Amnon, Absalom was getting revenge for the rape of his sister Tamar, as well as getting rid of the firstborn son, the one next in line to be king. Clearly, he had his sights set on being Israel's king, and he did everything in his power to obtain that goal. Killing a half-brother and rebelling against his father, Absalom was handsome and popular like his father, but he lacked his father's heart for God. What can we learn from this terrible story? Even the highest ranking and best equipped people are sinners and rebels at heart. We must guard our own hearts against sin and rebellion. David failed to teach his children God's ways. Even if our children are raised in church, we must teach and exemplify character and obedience to God. David was preoccupied with government, wives, and concubines. He failed to act decisively to correct the evil in his family. At times, his guilt about his own sin caused him to avoid disciplining his sons caught in similar sins. That proved to be his family's undoing. We must make every attempt to break cycles of lust, hatred, and rebellion. To do so, we must stay involved in guiding our children's lives while they are still under our care. I'm saying our like I have children. I do not have children, but you get the gist. Guide your child in God's grace. So, verse 11 to 17 says, She said, Then let the king invoke the Lord his God to prevent the avenger of blood from adding to the destruction so that my son will not be destroyed. As surely as the Lord lives, he said, not one hair of your son's head will fall to the ground. Then the woman said, Let your servant speak a word to my lord the king. Speak, he replied. The woman said, Why then have you devised a thing like this against the people of God? When the king says this, does he not convict himself? For the king has not brought back his banished son, like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be recovered, so we must die. But that is not what God desires. Rather, he devises ways so that a banished person does not remain banished from him. And now I have come to say this to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. Your servant thought, I will speak to the king, perhaps he will grant his servant's request. Perhaps the king will agree to deliver his servant from the hand of the man who is trying to cut off both me and my son from God's inheritance. And now your servant says, May the word of my lord the king secure my inheritance, for my lord the king is like an angel of God in discerning good and evil. May the Lord God be with you. The law provided for a way to avenge murder. The law provided for a way to avenge murder. Numbers chapter 35, verses 9 to 21 records how cities of refuge protected people from revenge and how blood avengers were to pursue murderers. This woman was asking for the king's protection against any claim against her because Joab wanted to convince David to restore Absalom. The special circumstance that David applied to her supposed situation could also apply to protecting Absalom. Verse 27 says, 3 sons and a daughter were born to Absalom. His daughter's name was Tamar, and she became a beautiful woman. By naming his daughter Tamar, Absalom was showing his love and respect for his sister Tamar. This also served as a reminder to everyone of the Amnon-Tamar incident. Verse 30 says, if I can find it, Then he said to his servants, Look, Joab's field is next to mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire. So Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Already we can see the seeds of rebellion in Absalom. As an independent and scheming young man, he took matters into his own hands and killed his brother. Without his father or anyone else to keep him in check, he probably did whatever he wanted, as evidenced by his setting Joab's field on fire to get his attention. Undoubtedly, Absalom's good looks also added to his self-centeredness and arrogance. Children need discipline, especially those who have natural abilities and physical attractiveness. Otherwise, like Absalom, they will grow up thinking they can do whatever they want to do whenever they want to. Verse 33 says, So Joab went to the king and told him this. Then the king summoned Absalom, and he came in and bowed down with his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. David made only half-hearted efforts to correct his children. He did not punish Amnon for his sin against Tamar, nor did he deal decisively with Absalom's murder of Amnon. Such inaction became David's undoing. When we ignore sin, we experience greater pain than if we deal with it immediately. David wrote, we see in throughout chapter 15, David wrote several psalms during the days of Absalom's rebellion. They possibly are Psalm 39, 41, 55, 61, and 63. Those are just 5 of them. By the way, I can't the other 2. But verse 2 of chapter 15 says, He would get up and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, What town are you from? He would answer, Your servant is from one of these tribes of Israel. The city gate was like City Hall and a shopping center combined. Because Jerusalem was the nation's capital, both local and national leaders met there daily to transact business and conduct government affairs. The city gate was the perfect spot for this because government and business transactions needed witnesses to be legitimate, and anyone entering or leaving the city had to pass through the gate. Merchants set up their tent shops near the gate for the same reason. Absalom, therefore, went to the city gate to win the hearts of Israel's leaders as well as those of the common people. Verse 5 and 6 says, Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. Absalom's political strategy was to distill the hearts of the people with his good looks, grand interests, apparent concern for justice, and friendly embraces. Many were fooled and switched their allegiance. Later, however, Absalom proved to be an evil ruler. We need to evaluate our leaders to make sure their charisma is not a mask covering greed, deception, or hunger for power. Make sure that underneath their style and charm, they are able to make good decisions and handle people wisely. Verse 9 says, The king said to him, Go in peace, so he went to Hebron. Absalom went to Hebron because it was his hometown. Hebron was David's first capital as well, and there Absalom could expect to find loyal friends who would be proud of him. Verse 14 says, Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword. Why couldn't David just crush this rebellion? There were several reasons he chose to flee. The rebellion was widespread and would not have been easily suppressed, possibly leading to civil war. David did not want the city of Jerusalem to be destroyed, and David still cared for his son and did not want to hurt him. We know that David expected to return to Jerusalem soon because he left 10 of his concubines to take care of the palace. He not only escaped from Jerusalem, the ensuing fight might have killed not only him, but also many innocent inhabitants of the city. Well, had he not escaped from Jerusalem, that may have happened. Some fights that we think are necessary can be costly and destructive to those around us. In such cases, it may be wise to back down and save the fight for another day, even if doing so hurts our pride. It takes courage to stand and fight, but it also takes courage to back down for the sake of others. Verse 17 to 18 says, So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at the edge of the city. All his men marched past him, along with all the Kerethites and Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath marched before the king. David had many loyal non-Israelites in his armed forces. The Gittites, men from the Philistine city of Gath, were apparently friends David had acquired while hiding from Saul. God had a purpose in David's time spent there. The Kerethites and Pelethites also came from Philistine territory. Although Israel was supposed to destroy wicked enemies, the people were to welcome foreigners who came on friendly terms and try to show them the importance of obeying God. The priests and Levites were also loyal to David. So we see David send spies to, Absalom, which were one of Hushai the Archite was also one of the spies who David sent. David needed spies in Absalom's court to inform him of Absalom's decisions. By serving Absalom as a supposed traitor to David, Hushai could offer advice contradictory to Ahithophel's advice. Ahithophel was Absalom's advisor and also Bathsheba's grandfather. Verse 3 says of chapter 16, verse 3 of 16 says, The king then asked, Where is your master's grandson? Ziba said to him, He is staying in Jerusalem because he thinks today the Israelites will restore to me my grandfather's kingdom. Saul was Mephibosheth's grandfather. Most likely Ziba was lying, hoping to receive a reward from David. Verse 4 says, Then the king said to Ziba, All that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours. I humbly bow, Ziba said. May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king. David believed Ziba's charge against Mephibosheth without checking into it or even being skeptical. Don't be hasty to accept someone's condemnation of another, especially when the accuser may profit from the other's downfall. David should have been skeptical of Ziba's comments until he checked them out for himself. Let me see, she may begin to cuss David whenever they make it to, where were they going? As they approach Bahurim. Someone from the clan of Benjamin, part of Saul's family, came out. Shimei was his name, and began to cuss him. Shimei kept up a steady tirade against David. Although his curses were unjustified because David had no part in Saul's death, David and his followers quietly tolerated the abuse. Maintaining your composure in the face of unjustified criticism can be a trying experience and an emotional drain, but if you can't stop criticism, it is best just to ignore it. Remember that God knows what you are enduring, and he will vindicate you if you are in the right. Verse 21-22 says, Ahithophel answered, Sleep with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself obnoxious to your father, and the hands of everyone with you will be more resolute. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof. and he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. This incident fulfilled Nathan's prediction that because of David's sin, another man would sleep with his wives. And crazy twist of it all, it was his own son who did that. Verse 23 says, Now in those days the advice Ahithophel gave was like that of one who inquires of God. That was how both David and Absalom regarded all of Ahithophel's advice. Ahithophel was a respected advisor to Absalom. Most rulers had advisors to help them make decisions about governmental and political matters. They probably arranged the king's marriages as well, because these were usually politically motivated unions. Absalom thought Ahithophel's advice was good and followed through with his suggestion. Later, however, God made Ahithophel's advice seem foolish, just as David prayed all the way back in chapter 15. So, that's chapter 9 to 16. Pretty crazy part of it. Mostly Absalom's rebellion and David's foolish sins of adultery and murder. So, we learn not to rebel, we learn not to lust, and we learn not to kill. We should know most of those, especially not to kill. And lust is very bad as well as rebellion. So we should not do either. We shouldn't do any of those. Definitely not. Murder is the most obvious. But next video will probably be 2 Samuel or Luke. I don't know. I'm really enjoying 2 Samuel. I want to keep reading it. I have the urge to do another video tonight, but I'm also sleepy, and I feel like I won't be able to make it through another video. So it's 12 a.m. by the way. I find myself doing videos this late occasionally now, but my cup says it's a psalm. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46 verse 10. That's what it's quoting. Psalm 46 verse 10 says, Be still and know that I am God. I want to show you all that cup. I like this cup a lot. I bought it on Amazon a few months ago. I was looking for one that says Psalm 55 verse 22, because that's my favorite verse. You know, it says, Cast your burdens unto the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. It pretty much covers a lot of what God is. A comforting God, a loving God, and a God who takes away the burdens and the chains of suffering. So, but thank you for watching. We're going to say prayer now. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Lord, I thank you for today. I ask that you give us wisdom. I ask that you take our burdens away, and I ask that you give us understanding, Lord. I ask and thank you for those things I just asked for, because you have given us that. And every day we read the Bible, we are able to learn from it, and we are able to be able to teach these things we learn. And so clearly, you have given us understanding and wisdom, and that's obvious. We have received your gifts, Lord, and I thank you for it. I ask that people can learn from these videos, as I have as well. I have learned a lot from these videos too. I thank you for everything. I thank you for providing for me. I thank you for these people. I just ask that if there's anyone suffering, they can suffer joyfully, knowing that you will uphold them with your righteous right hand. I ask that if there's anyone who doesn't have you, they can find you, and if there's anyone who already has you, they continue to pursue you and pursue others in your name, hoping that those people will also pursue you as well, Lord. I thank you for all this. I pray all this in your name. I praise you and thank you for all this in your name. I give you all the glory, Lord. In your name I pray. Amen. Good night. God bless. God bless worldwide. And love you all.